really want to focus on custom projects, and we want to create those relationships that people can tell us what they want, and we can be a supplier for them. And we would love to do unique pieces like what I just showed you here, but we also want to be a supplier for some of these contractors that just need access to unique pieces to build things with.
I am out here in Versailles. We are the north end of the lake above Gravois Mills at Timber Ridge Millworks, Oasis Tree Service with my new friend Israel. Thanks for having me. So you've got two businesses here that we're talking about and highlighting. We're focusing on Timber Ridge, but tell us a little bit about your business, how you got started, and kind of what led you to this business.
Sure. Back in 2007, I chose to start a tree service business after being in lawn care for a while. And, you know, trees fascinate me because it takes a long time to grow a tree. They provide a lot of benefits. They're actually a lot more sensitive than what you think they are. And, you know, proper tree care, in both the treatments, the trimming, and doing safe removals without damaging any property or structures, or just doing it safely. That's important to me. So we got into it. I learned everything I could. About 4 years in, I became a certified arborist, and that put me in touch with a whole community of people that care about trees. And I learned an awfully lot about proper tree techniques or treatment techniques, just the proper ways to do tree work, and just expanded my knowledge of the industry. And then the other thing that did was put me in touch with all the equipment that was available to us as tree care professionals. We started expanding our crew and getting a bigger network of clients. And then with our focus on efficiency and just the whole lake area, the opportunities down here, it's really given me the opportunity to expand my business and educate people in the industry.
You know, one of the things that I found most fascinating is that tree removal, as we talk about Oasis Tree Service, it's not just simply tree removal. I mean, like, you going in, having the expertise that you have, being able to diagnose when a tree needs to potentially be removed before it falls on your house or your garage or your deck, which you just experienced with someone, right?
That's correct.
There's so much more to this business, and just the little time I've spent with Israel, I've blown away, and I'm looking forward to sharing more about that. Just the depth of knowledge about the types of trees. When you can diagnose if a tree is ill, you could probably diagnose, I imagine, and give a pretty good assessment on when you anticipate the tree is probably going to fall in a certain period of time.
So there's indicators definitely of when a tree is experiencing root loss, when a tree is experiencing internal decay, when you have what we call included bark, which makes for a weak crotch. And my goal is to not tell you what to do, but give you options for your trees and try to educate you as to, what the best option might be. But ultimately, there is no magic formula that says when a tree is going to fall or when a tree is going to fail. A lot of that is weather dependent, and it's pretty hard to see what's going on underground.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things you mentioned was your equipment, and you're very unique in this geographic area in terms of the size of the equipment and the size of tree that you can remove. You want to talk a little bit about that and what kind of separates you from a lot of the other tree services that are potentially in this geographic area of the lake?
So one of the biggest challenges we have here at the lake is access. And that complicates things both in getting equipment in to do the work and also in getting the material out once it's cut. So we have found that cranes is a lot of times the safest option, not to mention probably the most economical. We use a crane for our benefit, not to try to upsell the job, because we see the advantages both in efficiency and safety. And that's given us the option to take out some very large trees in a short amount of time without having the manual labor of packing it all out by hand.
And give me an example of some size trees that you have taken out just in the last probably 30 days.
So, because we use a crane, we have scales on the crane, we can see what the weights are. That's very fascinating to me because, you know, a mature tree, let's just say a mature red oak tree that's in the 30-inch diameter range can weigh upwards of 50,000 pounds. So, you know, there's a lot of weight to remove efficiently and safely, and it's to have the equipment to do that mostly with hydraulics is, I think, really cool.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And as you mentioned, there's just not, because of the topography down here at the lake, I mean, it is not easy just to even access. It's hard to access property sometimes by a car that's got four-wheel drive, let alone massive equipment. And you guys, I imagine, are just skilled experts.
Well, we've experimented with a lot of different types of equipment to figure out what's the most efficient. You know, it's never a one-size-fits-all. So we have different equipment options for different jobs, and I feel like that's probably the biggest thing that sets us apart from some of these smaller crews that simply haven't had the experience or the equipment to work with on some of these projects.
Yeah. But it doesn't just stop there. You have now since taken that tree service now, parlayed it into a completely different business that's relatively new, but can do some really fascinating things with all of this wood and these trees that you're now removing from people's properties.
So yeah, about 4 years ago, we had this vision to take some of our waste wood, which you know, we were getting a lot of big logs in from these large removals. We were getting a lot of decent stuff in from people's yards, and we really hated to throw it away, to burn it, or to put it into firewood because it's good stuff. And the problem with yard trees is a large percentage of yard trees has metal in it of some type, due to putting up bird feeders, just hanging stuff on trees. A lot of people do that. It's very common. But that does create a problem for a production type sawmill. So we chose to start more of a custom mill to mill these large unique logs and turn them into a product that would be marketable and very unique for this area.
Yeah, and then I think that's where we're going to take this interview next, because I've already had the pleasure of getting a tour of the equipment that you use, some of the finished product, some of the product that's kind of in between. I mean, even talking about the kiln, which is something, I mean, I've learned more today than I've ever could have imagined about wood. And I look forward to sharing that. So you want to go take a tour? We'll show everybody around?
Yeah, we can do that.
Let's do it.
Whether you are looking to buy, sell, rent, invest, vacation, or pretty much do anything at the Lake of the Ozarks, we've got you covered. Just shoot me a message at this number and I will make sure to get you connected to the right people for the job and make sure that your experience or your life at the Lake of the Ozarks is an incredible one.
All right, Israel, where are we starting out here?
So this here is probably the heart of our operation. It's our sawmill, our custom mill that we cut everything up with, and we can do anything from lumber to beams to live edge slabs, which we have a couple of slabbing attachments that go on the mill, and we can make a slab up to 50 or 60 inches wide, and whatever thickness we need. So it gives us a lot of options. It's not necessarily a production mill, but we can do a lot of cool things with it.
So you mentioned that this piece of equipment right here, this saw, came from New Zealand.
That's correct, yes. We ordered it from New Zealand and had it shipped up here.
And one of the things that you've mentioned a lot and one of the things you specialize in is beams.
Yes.
And we'll show that. So like, give me an example of the various uses. Obviously, we're thinking decorative beams in somebody's home or condo or a mantle, right? Are those kind of the main reasons why somebody gets a beam?
Beams can be used a lot of different ways. Probably where you see them the most is just in fireplace mantles. And another thing you think of right away is lodges, where you have a lot of exposed beams in the construction. There's also just timber frame construction, which the frame is made out of beams. And then there's also the accent beams in living areas where it just adds some wood look and feel to your home.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, so this thing is, you described it. It is, tell me again, because I don't know the proper terminology. I know you've got a bunch of wood. Let's go show them the wood over here. So some finished products, but what this machine does is, describe that for us.
So obviously, they're just the lumber, the different sizes of lumber that we can make, like this pile here of maple that we milled up. This stack behind here is some live edge slabs that were milled quite a while ago, and they are dry and ready to go now. And then you see up here the some more lumber, various species of lumber that we have, and then more slabs, some of the white slabs that we have that are sanded and finished and ready to go. There's a lot of different things, like I said, that we can do. And this here would be a walnut mantle that still needs sanded, but it's ready to sand and work with here. So that's some of the things that we can do with our mill.
That's really awesome. And really, correct me if I'm wrong here, but kind of sky's the limit. I think you mentioned it. What was the term you used? That creativity is the only thing stopping somebody.
So yeah, creative imagination is what you need to figure out what you want out of a piece of wood.
Yeah.
And you know, you have epoxy options, you have different stains. There's just so many things you can do.
Which, speaking of, let's take us back to that room.
Sure. Here you go.
All right, you've brought me in a whole nother room here. Where are we now?
So we do all of our planing, sanding, and surfacing here in this room. And we get everything squared up and just any type of finish work that needs done, this is where it happens. And we keep this room conditioned primarily for the humidity level, keeping that low so the wood doesn't move while we work with it.
So, okay, this is a great educational piece because you already explained this to me, but I don't want to assume many people know that. And there is a certain humidity level that wood needs to be stored at, or that wood needs to be at, in order for it to basically have a long life, correct? As a piece of furniture?
So if you don't keep your humidity levels consistent, what can happen is the piece of wood can take on moisture and swell, or dry out and crack. Those are the two things that happens with wood. And it's different wood has different wood species have different characteristics, and some hold moisture better or worse than others. That depends a lot on the species.
So show me an example of something that is going to obviously go out to someone's home and be a finished product. And you mentioned this piece of wood right here. So tell us what its future looks like.
So this here is a walnut, and it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 70, 80 years old.
Wow.
And so this piece has a fair bit of character, some black lines, it's pretty unique. And so this here could either be a bar top, a wide bar top, it could be a table, it could be an accent piece for your living room. There's a lot of things that it could be. And any one of these pieces we have could be cut down to like a coffee table or something smaller. We prefer not to do that with these big pieces, but they can be.
Yeah, because something of this size is just rare to find.
That's right.
Okay, where are we now?
So this is back at our computerized router, CNC, and what this machine does for us, we have a surfacing head on the end of it, and this is what we call our slab flattener. And that's important to use a table like this, because if you put it through like a planer, if it's got a side twist or just a twist in any way, it'll follow that through the planer and you won't get a flat piece of wood. But this here, we just surface the top and then we just keep going down until we have a flat surface.
How is that identified? Is it because of the computer equipment that can determine that it's perfectly flat?
So we lock it in and yeah, it just keeps going over the piece and drops it a 1/4 inch each time until it's surfaced, the whole thing is surfaced. So this here, we actually cut some legs out of a piece that we had here that blew up. And this was, we actually used this CNC router to cut out our shapes.
Wow, that's very meticulous. Where to from here?
Let's go ahead and go into our finish room and our showroom.
All right. All right, next room.
So we are now in our finish room, the back side of our finish room here. And this is where all the finishing happens and any epoxy work that we offer or we do for our clients. And we have also our finished products around the corner here. Finished slabs that have been sanded and just ready for a project or for you to take and work with yourself. We have a lot of options here. And
So it's both. It's not just, I mean, you can do the entire from start to finish project, or if somebody just needs a really high quality piece of wood.
That's right, yes. If you want a piece of wood that's dried, sanded, and ready to go for whatever you want to do with it, it's here.
So give me an example here, because we're looking, as I walk through these, you know, you've got maple, obviously familiar with maple. You've got sycamore, you've got an oak. I noticed there was one over here that was catalpa. Now, tell us the difference between, or why we would identify between any of those different species of wood.
So different woods have different looks. They've got different feels. They've got different characteristics. Like your catalpa would be rot resistant. It's got a chemical right in the wood that makes it rot resistant. Your walnut is a tighter grain wood that sands to a higher gloss. You've got more distinct sapwood color differences in some woods than others. And then with some of these woods, like this maple piece here, you get some spalting. That's something that we like to see. And then of course we have, here's some cedar, red cedar, which is a softer wood but has a lot of character, and it's also rot resistant.
You had mentioned that some of this wood would be better for outdoor use versus indoor use. Explain that. Explain that.
Some wood just stays stable. Like your white oak wood has a closed cell wood construction, so water can't get into it nearly as easily as, say, a red oak, which is a direct indication of how quickly it's going to rot.
So basically, you need to know these things if you're going to be using something as a bench in the outdoors versus something that you keep inside all year round.
That's correct. And there's a lot of differences in wood. You can go online and learn a lot about this, or you can come in and talk to us and we can help you with your selection.
Far more interesting to come talk to these guys, I can tell you right now. Now, you did teach me one other thing before we show some more finished products, and that is what you do with the kiln. You take us outside and show us what you guys got going on there? Because that's pretty unique. All right, Israel, where are we now?
So after we cut everything goes out into the yard for the initial drying stage. And this wood dries to a certain percentage out here in the open. We can typically get it down to about 12% out here in the open, as long as it's stickered properly and has good airflow. Stickers are the small pieces of wood that keep the layers separate and allow good airflow. From there, we take it into our solar kiln, which is the building back there. We've got a solar collector on the south side, and then we have all that hot air gets forced into one of those bays for faster drying. And the solar kiln is unique because it allows the wood to dry during the day, and then it equalizes at night. And it's a slower process that creates a more stable wood product.
But then you also have a large mambo jumbo kiln that can just take that heat real quick, right?
So this here is our next. This here is a kiln that we are still doing some testing with. We've had good results with it. This is technology that started in Europe, and it's used widely there. But it's called a thermal modification kiln, where we actually take the wood to 400 degrees approximately, depending on the species, of course. But it actually changes the cellular structure of the wood and makes it rot resistant, makes it insect resistant, and essentially creates a treated wood product without the chemicals.
That's the important piece right there. You and I discussed this. The disadvantage is because it's more efficient, especially at scale, to use chemicals. But some of the obvious disadvantages of chemicals are?
Well, there's several things. Probably the biggest thing would just be just the exposure to them. Children, pets, even personal contact. There's all kinds of warning labels on that wood when you buy it, not to touch it, not to make sure you wash your hands before you eat, etc., which tells me that it's not good. And so this creates a safe product. You know, you can use this stuff for your planters, you can use it for benches, whatever you want, without having to worry about the chemicals.
And I imagine there's probably not anybody else in this area that has the ability to do this sort of thing.
So this is, I would still consider this a small scale kiln. We can do a lot, but we have a real quick turnaround. Turnaround on this kiln is only about 3 days. So we can do small batches efficiently and get you what you need.
Awesome. Let's head back inside and show me which some of the final products. All right, we are back inside here, and this is kind of like your showroom, right?
Yes, we have a few finished pieces here. This is some stuff that we did. Here's a coffee table that we built. It's a maple coffee table with some spalting and a little bit of epoxy work in the holes, the knot holes.
So you mentioned spalting. I've never heard that word until today. Can you please explain to our audience what that means?
So spalting is these black lines here, and it is the beginning stages of rot. And if you were to look at this tree, like peel it apart in layers, you would see a black layer around the stem. And where you see it here is just black streaks because it was cut the long way. So it is the beginning stages of rot, and it actually adds quite a bit of character to these pieces.
I was going to say, like, my first initial reaction is rot. That's not a good thing, but you're intentionally wanting this for the character of the unique coloration of the wood.
It creates a lot of contrast, and if you're wanting a rustic looking piece, contrast is definitely an added thing to this piece.
Now, I think what we're looking at and what we've talked about a lot today is might be a consumer or an audience might be thinking to themselves, all right, this is great for a homeowner, right? But you actually work with a lot of contractors, and so builders and people that need the beams and need have different needs for wood. Can you explain why a contractor would want to work with you?
So we really want to focus on custom projects, and we want to create those relationships that people can tell us what they want, and we can be a supplier for them. And we would love to do unique pieces like what I just showed you here, but we also want to be a supplier for some of these contractors that just need access to unique pieces to build things with. So I wanted to show you this beam here. This is a thermally modified beam. This is a small one, of course, but we created this beam in just a few days, and you see how it looks. It looks like it's 100 years old. It's full of character. It's all split up, and we can do beams of any size like this. We can make them 6 inches by 8 inches. We can make them 8 inches by 12 inches, any size, any length, up to 20 foot. So we feel like this is a good option for a old looking beam that you can get any size, any time.
That's awesome. And you had mentioned as it relates to the heat and how it, I guess, cures, that it changes the color of the wood.
Yes, so that's one thing that's interesting about the thermal modification process. It'll turn your lighter woods dark, and your darker woods won't change a lot, but it gives it almost a toasted look. And this here is a white oak piece right here.
White oak that's now brown.
And this was cut after the fact, and you can see that color is pretty consistent all the way through.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating.
So we can actually create pieces that look
as dark as that.
Like walnut, and this is a piece of maple.
Oh, wow. And maple's typically like the piece of wood behind you.
This here is maple.
Holy cow. Hold those up next to each other. Wow.
So that's what we can do with that process.
And can you do that without having a kiln?
There's no way to do it without being able to heat wood up to that temperature, and the only way to heat wood up to that temperature is to displace the oxygen so the wood doesn't burn.
That's insane. All right, Israel, we've talked about some of the projects that you guys can handle, and it's tables, it's benches, it's mantles, it's beams. But you had shown me this particular piece of wood, which leads me back to kind of a question that I wanted to ask, which is, what are some of the ideas and also some of the most unique projects you guys have taken on? And let's start with this, because show our audience like what happened here, and like what are some of the things that you could do with a project like this?
So this here was a piece of sycamore. It had been laying for a little while, and so it got some spalting. Some of this blue is also some of that rot, and you see the different coloring from that. So it had a split, it had a defect here, and for all intents and purposes was a trash piece of wood. So then we actually took walnut and we put these bow ties in to stabilize this crack. And then we filled this crack in with resin or epoxy, and we put a blue swirl in the back of it, and then filled the front up with clear. And there is so many things you can do with epoxy. You can put in bullet casings, you can put in coins. There's so many different things that people do with epoxy, and that can all just be part of the piece once it's all done.
That's fascinating. Now, you also mentioned a couple of really massive jobs that you've done, which, one was building a bridge. Tell us about that.
So we've done several bridges, both private and working with the state. There's still a few wooden bridges on some of the state roads in Cole County, and we've done all the beams and the deck for those bridges.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then we did a project a couple years ago for a big timber frame barn. It was built out of pine, Missouri pine. And so they brought the logs up here, we squared them up, different sizes of beams that they wanted for this project. And I think the total project was a little over 100,000 board foot of beams, and we did about 50 to 60% of that project.
Wow. And you said that project's not even done yet.
No, they're still working on it.
That's amazing. So basically, sky's the limit. Like anything you can do with wood.
And then we have a lot of people that bring us logs that they can't get milled anywhere else because of their sheer size. And we have the equipment here on site to move those logs around, to mill them, to get logs down to the size of pieces they want to work with.
And your geographic area, what areas of the lake do you service?
So we are at the north end of the lake. We're right off of 5 Highway, just close to Versailles here. And a 50-mile radius would put us covering the whole lake, would put us in Sedalia, put us in Jeff City, and pretty much all of the surrounding areas there. I would be interested in you calling and telling us what you're looking for, and then we actually, if we can't supply you ourselves, we are working with Cardwell Lumber out of Jeff City as a supplier, and then we could bring it here and you could pick it up here. You can only do so much by yourself, and your team is an extension of a business owner. So my team is the most important. You can have the best equipment in the world, but without your team, it's not worth anything. And so my lead guy with Oasis, Matt, he's been with me 12 years. He's the crew leader. He's on the jobs that I'm not, and he's the one in charge. And then with everybody on the team, there's over 40 years of experience on the team with Oasis. So that shows you our teamwork, our culture. The guys love to work together. Safety is a big thing whenever you're used to working together. And so yeah, teamwork is everything. And then up here at Timber Ridge, we have 4 guys that work together up here. My lead guy's been with me since we started the business, and he's very good at taking a project and showing you what you can do with the different types of wood. So yeah, teamwork is everything.
Israel, this has been fascinating. I've learned a ton today. I hope our audience loves this, and more than anything, recognizes that this exists, because I had no idea, and I imagine a lot of people don't realize it either. So if somebody wants to connect with you, first of all, where can they go do more research and find out about you? Website, social media, where are you at?
So yes, we have a website for, well, maybe I'll start with Oasis. We have a website for Oasis, lakeozarkarborist.com. Our number there is 573-789-2556. But I would encourage anyone that's doing research on Oasis to look us up on Google. We have a profile there. You can read through the reviews. You can look through the pictures of some of the jobs that we've done, some of our equipment. And if you have any specific questions for us, don't hesitate to reach out. Here at Timber Ridge, we also have a website. It's timberridgemill.com. And we have a separate number for this. It's 573-789-3325. And we do have a presence on Google Maps, but we are still building our reviews, and there's not as much on that. But you're definitely welcome to give us a call to discuss any projects or anything that you might be interested in here.
And I know that you're going to have a very strong social presence here very soon. So by the time this video airs, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, a lot of cool content, watching the entire process from the beginning of when you go and assess or seeing a tree on top of a house, to the tree removal, to bringing the tree back to this facility, and just watching the entire thing come to life, which is going to be absolutely fascinating. I'm personally looking forward to it, so I know you have at least one fan. And again, if you need any of this work done, whether it's Oasis or it's here at the mill, you've got some options that you may not have known existed. And they can come here in Versailles. It took me about 45 minutes to get here from Camdenton. So very easy, straight shot up 5, right off of 5, very easy to find. And you can come here and actually touch and feel and look at and have a conversation and become a hell of a lot smarter just by coming up here and hanging out with this guy for an hour. Thank you so much for having us out here, man. This has been an absolute pleasure. Look forward to watching this thing flourish and grow. And again, make sure you check these guys out. Go online, get yourself up here to Versailles, and you know what? Get yourself a really cool piece of furniture, a beam, anything that you can pretty much dream up. They can pretty much do it, right?
We will certainly try.
Finish it up.
Thank you for watching another episode on the Lake of the Ozarks Lifestyle Channel. And remember, if you are looking to buy, sell, rent, invest, vacation, pretty much do anything at the Lake of the Ozarks, we've got you covered. Shoot me a message and I will make sure to get you connected to the right people to make sure that your experience at the Lake of the Ozarks is an incredible one. Thank you for your loyalty to our channel. Don't keep us a secret. Make sure you share this with other people that would be interested. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. See you on the next one.